Hi, this is Anusha from uvassociates.in and you are watching part 3 from the Blender tutorial series Blending Made Easy. Lot to cover in this video. Okay, so first of all, panning the view. Let's place our 3D cursor over here. Add in the object, a UV sphere. Now I want to work with the UV sphere zoomed in. Shift, Alt, left click and drag to bring the UV sphere into view. This is called panning. Alright, Shift, Alt, left click and drag. Now I'm not happy with the scene. I want to go back to the default. So I'll press Ctrl X, erase all. You must have noticed that not everything got erased. We still have our default cube, lamp and camera. Everything else will get erased. So these are our default settings. Can we change it? Yes. So I had told you that we have three windows over here. Buttons, the 3D viewport, and over here we have the user preferences window, which I said was partially hidden. So time to make it completely visible. Bring your mouse cursor over here, hover on the boundary of these two windows and you'll see a double-sided arrow. Click and drag down and you can see that a new window has come up. This is not a new window basically, this is just a partially hidden part of the user preferences window. Now let's start with this one. First tab is views and controls. Interesting thing is tooltips. We're not going to cover everything, of course. You can just play around with the settings and you can have these tooltips which are very handy. So if you want these tooltips to be invisible, if they irritate you, you can just deselect this, but it's very handy, so I'll keep it. Now object info. This displays the object info over here in the left hand side of your 3D viewport. You can select or deselect it. Now let's leave all this for now. Just concentrate on this view rotation, the mode of the view rotation. When I do a Alt left click for rotating the view, right now my mode is turntable. I'm just moving from left to right. That is Alt left click, drag from left to right. Now contrast this with the next mode of rotation, that is trackball. Alt left click and you can see when I drag, this rotation is different from the turntable rotation. You can of course keep the settings you prefer. Both of them are useful at times. Then you have around selection, which actually makes the rotation around selection, and you can just play around with the other settings. Alright, so let's move on. Here we can have okay, one more thing over here. Rotate view and pan view. So the middle mouse button can be used to rotate the view. I'm just as an alternative to your Alt left click and drag. So you can just hold your middle mouse button down to rotate the view, and you can also do panning of the view if you have made the selection over here as pan view. So keep the setting as you desire. Next are the edit methods. Edit methods, here you can see that you can have selection of how many steps do you want to save for undo. So I have selected the maximum number possible, that is 64. You can have the number of steps that you think is going to be okay for you. So obviously the smaller values will conserve the memory. The more number of steps you have, more memory will be required by Blender. Next you have languages and font. We are skipping everything else right now. We'll come back to that later as and when required. Now language and font. If you want to have some international fonts in Blender 3D, you can go ahead and select this one. Themes. So there are hundreds of themes available on the internet, but two themes come by default with Blender. One is the default theme, as you have already seen. Other is this rounded theme, which I prefer over the default theme, so I'm going to keep this one. And then comes Autosave. So how many files do you want to have? After how many minutes do you want to have autosave being done? So I'll set it to 3 minutes for myself. As you can see over here, I'm actually doing a sliding on these values. You can actually click on this value and key in the value you want, or you can also do a sliding as I'm doing by left click and dragging from left to right. So these are all sliders when they have this left arrow and the right arrow. You'll see a lot of sliders in the buttons window later as well. So that's a point to keep in mind. Now save versions of the same file. Say I'll keep it to 2. Number of old versions to maintain in the current directory while manually saving. So tooltips come in handy over here. You can open the recent file if you want to. Alright, so we'll move on to system and open GL. Okay, now you actually have to see the other things later. We'll see other things later. You can see over here that we have a button called emulate numpad. This is very interesting. I told you the other day that the numpad keys are different from the number keys on your keypad. The keyboard will have numpad keys as well as the keypad keys. So if you have a laptop which does not have a numpad, you can actually use emulate numpad, and the number keys on the keypad will behave in the same way as the number keys on the numpad. Okay, so next are the file paths. This is very important. So first of all, let's get on to this one here. The output which is rendered, the default directory which comes with the factory settings of Blender 3D is ctemp. You can change it from here, browse for the file you want to and select it. This P over here is to move to the parent directory, and you can select the directory you want to have. The desktop will generally be available over here, and you can browse from there if you want. Alright, and here I have set my fonts directory to C Windows fonts. This is how Blender would know where to look for the fonts in your system, in which directory to look for the fonts. Similarly for textures, I have not set a particular directory for textures, but if you have one, you can set it over here. Then you have something called a directory for storing the temporary save files, that is /temp. By default all these are /temps, and you can just change them to the paths that you want to. So this is one thing about the paths. Now I'll just go back here and go back to my top view and bring it here by shift alt and panning the view. Okay, so now I want these settings which I have made to be my default settings. So I'll go to file and save the default settings. So you could have pressed Control U. So now whenever I'll do a Control X, say I have done a alt left click to rotate the view, pan the view and everything. Now I'm doing a Control X. I'll return back to the settings which I have saved. If you want to restore the factory settings that came with Blender 3D, you could just go and say load factory settings, and your factory settings will be restored as your default settings. So there you are. This is all about the user preferences window for now, and there is much more to the user preferences window than this, but we'll stop over here for now, and that's it. So thanks for watching.